Hey, what's happening, friend? Big Dog Ethan here, coming at you from a recording here on WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is none other than the Unnatural State of Affairs, where we talk politics in the first hour and play music in the second hour. Normally, this show is going to be a little bit different because I've got a lot to catch up on. So first, I'm going to get into my updates on the potential genocide that's going on in Gaza at this point in time. Newsflash, nothing pretty is going to be said in that segment. And then after that, I'm going to be talking about how the Murfreesboro mayor, Shane McFarland, bemoaned having more immigrants in Rutherford County schools on Twitter. Lot to say about that. That's going to be a very long segment. Got a lot to talk about, and probably so much that we'll actually be, like I said, we'll probably be going over into the music segment. So it's there's not gonna be as much music on today's show for those who are listening to the WMTS live broadcast. So with that out of the way, let's get into what's happening in Israel and Gaza. Alrighty, so I'm going to briefly cover some of the big updates on Israel's potential genocide in Gaza. I'm sure as many of you know, there's really not much good news that's coming out of this area of the Middle East lately. First, I'm going to cover some casualty updates from the Euromed Human Rights Monitor. Then I'm going to talk about how the IDF just admitted, it was a couple of weeks ago. I was going to talk about this last week. But the IDF admitted to hosting a gore porn Telegram channel. Yeah, it's pretty wild. And then I'll be covering what the Biden administration and especially the House of Representatives are planning to do regarding Israel, also not pretty. And then finally, I'll be talking about a more local update regarding this potential genocide. It's all pretty disturbing news. But all this will end on a bit of a slightly hopeful note. That's going to depend on how you view that, I guess. So, first, the casualty updates from the Euromed Human Rights Monitor. So we just got these new stats today. Sorry, I take that back. Yesterday. Yeah, it would have been Tuesday for those who are listening on the airwaves. These numbers keep increasing. We now have 36,671 dead. 33,590 of those are civilians. And I like that the group is now putting out these little stats here where they actually give you the percentage of civilians and the percentage of children and women who've also been killed. There is a 92% civilian death rate now. As of right now, a 92% of civilians have been killed in these attacks. And again, for reference, the Iraq Body Count Project, if you calculate the max number of civilian deaths and divide that by the total deaths in the Iraq War, just total, that was a 70.1% civilian death rate. And furthermore, according to Brown University's Cost of War project, yeah, there is an estimated 28.8% civilian death rate that resulted from the Afghanistan war. And both of those wars that I just mentioned were notorious for the number of civilians that were killed in those wars. So to see that Israel has already racked up a higher civilian death rate than both of those wars, again, more evidence to suggest that what we are seeing happening in Gaza right now is Israel committing a genocide. So on top of that, though, we also now have 70,180 injured. We have 127 journalists killed. 2 million people have been displaced. And according to the CIA World Fact Book, the population of Gaza, 2.1, nearly 2.1 million people live in Gaza at this point in time. And it's kind of awkward. I have to scroll up here to show you that, yes, these are the stats for the Gaza Strip. So 2.1 million people live in Gaza. That, if you do the math, means 95.2% of Gaza's population has been displaced as a result of Israel's indiscriminate bombing. 95.2% of people in the Gaza Strip have been displaced. And all this is showing that what is happening there is just war crimes on top of war crimes. If you want a great singular story that really shows just how the IDF is operating in Gaza right now, Breaking Point's just put out a really great segment. It was one of their solo segments that was done by Crystal Ball. She talked about how this 6-year-old kid was killed by the IDF, just gunned down point blank. She was a 6-year-old kid, and that segment, after I watched it, I just had to stop and breathe, because it is absolutely infuriating to know that those kind of actions are what our taxes are funding. It's absolutely devastating. I would go through more of these stats, but due to time constraints, I'm just going to link these sources for you in the description of the podcast so you can verify them yourself. Again, my podcast, it's called The Kennel. It's run through Substack. The link is https://thekennel.substack.com. Again, https://thekennel.substack.com. You can find links to these sources and all the sources that I cite in this episode. Moving on, we've also been told that the IDF has recently admitted to running gory Telegram channels. I would classify these as gore porn Telegram channels, or say channels plural. Technically it was one, but still one is way too much. So yeah, Haaretz put out an article a couple of weeks ago, and for those who don't know, Haaretz is an Israel-based news outlet. They put out an article a couple of weeks ago reporting that the IDF did in fact admit to hosting a Telegram channel where soldiers would send images and videos glorifying violent acts committed against Gazans. Now, the Haaretz article is paywalled, so I'm going to be going off this February 5th Vice article. Here's what it says. Quote, on October 9th, 2023, the Telegram channel 72 Virgins Uncensored started posting gore-filled photos and videos from the front lines of Israel's war on Gaza. An investigation from Haaretz revealed in December that the Israeli military ran the channel. The IDF initially denied the accusation, but reversed course after an internal investigation, Haaretz reported on Sunday. Videos and images on the channel included the dead bodies of Palestinian civilians and resistance fighters alongside racist text. Quote, exterminating the roaches, exterminating the Hamas rats, share this beauty, unquote. One post said above pictures of captured Palestinians. Another post showed an Israeli soldier dipping their gun into a liquid. Quote, what a man lubricates bullets with lard. "You won't get your virgins," the text said on the video. The text on the video said, according to a translation from Haaretz. In the past months, several unconfirmed videos have gone viral on social media purporting to show soldiers mocking Palestinians by dipping their bullets in pig fat, which is forbidden under Islam. Since October 7th, nearly 30,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli military in Gaza, where Israeli occupation forces have blocked almost all humanitarian aid from entering the densely populated Palestinian territory. A December 12th, 2023 investigation by Haaretz revealed that the Gore channel was run by the Israeli military. The IDF originally denied it was behind the grotesque videos, but on February 4th, Haaretz published a follow-up article in which a spokesperson for the occupation forces said it figured out it was, in fact, behind the channel's posts. According to Haaretz, IDF Major General Oded Bazyuk, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, he conducted an internal probe. Apparently, people in his chain of command lied to him about the channel and its connection to Israel's influencing department. Quote, "In the wake of these findings, the unit's wartime commander is to end his military service," Haaretz reported. The IDF also claimed the page had been started without authorization or authority from leadership, according to Haaretz. Sure, the IDF technically didn't officially approve of the channel, but the sheer existence of this Telegram channel is very telling of how its own soldiers are conducting themselves as they engage in an assault on Gaza, which the International Court of Justice has deemed to be a plausible genocide. What's even more wild is that as this report demonstrates that the IDF is failing to moderate its soldiers, the U.S. House of Representatives is voting to send additional aid to Israel, who again is responsible for many of these violent acts. Now, the Senate just passed a bill approving $14 billion of aid to Israel. This article is from Ryan Grimm. He put out an article in The Intercept a couple of days ago in which he zones in on a speech from Senator Van Hollen, which he gave before the bill was voted on. Quote, Van Hollen drove the point home. Quote, "Kids in Gaza are now dying from the deliberate withholding of food. In addition to the horror of that news, one other thing is true. That is a war crime. It is a textbook war crime. And that makes those who orchestrate it war criminals," he said, adding that he had recently spoken with officials at humanitarian relief organizations. Quote, "Every one of them, everyone has stated that their organizations have never experienced a humanitarian disaster as dire and terrible as the world is witnessing in Gaza," unquote. He went on to say that 3 weeks ago, he met with officials at the State Department to ask why they were not enforcing a section of the Foreign Assistance Act that blocks security assistance to countries that hinder the delivery of U.S. humanitarian aid. That law clearly applies to Israel, Van Hollen said, but the State Department has yet to respond to him. Van Hollen pulled no punches. Quote, "What should the United States do when the Netanyahu government refuses to prioritize the release of the hostages?" he asked, attacking Benjamin Netanyahu for going on an American Sunday show to announce that despite Joe Biden's pressure, he'd still be launching an assault on Rafah, the southern Gaza city that is home to some 1.3 million huddling and starving Palestinians. The senator's speech pulsed with moral clarity, until it petered out into a stumbling rationale for his forthcoming yes vote. He would still be voting to send some $14 billion to the people he had just described as war criminals, he said, because the bill also included $60 billion for Ukraine's war effort and humanitarian aid for Sudan, Gaza, Ukraine, and elsewhere. It also ponies up $8 billion for a Taiwan war effort. He acknowledged that the aid money wouldn't be worth anything to the Palestinians if Netanyahu wouldn't let it in, and he pleaded with Biden to pressure Netanyahu to do so. But if even this level of moral clarity from somebody like Van Hollen isn't matched with any action, it's hard to see why those pleas will be heard this time. When the roll was called, only Senator Bernie Sanders and Merkley, Van Hollen's companion on that recent trip to Rafah, voted no. It needed 60 votes to overcome a filibuster, and thanks to significant opposition from Republicans, it only got 66. A small block of Democrats could have blocked it and forced the Senate to consider each spending piece separately. Now, it heads for the buzzsaw of the dysfunctional House of Representatives, where Speaker Mike Johnson says he won't take it up because it doesn't include border provisions. That's laugh out loud stuff, since it was Johnson who insisted the bill not include the border deal the Senate came up with. Johnson said the House will now write its own legislation, so who knows where this aid package heads next. Either way, the slaughter continues, and the legislation the Senate approved bans U.S. funding for United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, the main relief and works agency in Gaza, unquote. I can't imagine acknowledging a country's war crimes in front of the U.S. Senate and the national media, for that matter, then continuing to justify and then voting to send that same country $14 billion. Just absolutely disgusting. I don't care what other provisions are in that bill. The fact that that bill alone would be providing aid to a nation that is potentially committing a genocide, as the International Court of Justice has just ruled about a month ago, that makes it an automatic no vote. But whatever. I guess it's okay to justify sending $14 billion in aid to a nation that is committing war crimes on top of war crimes. What's just as disgusting is the Israeli Defense Forces bombing of the Rafah crossing during the Super Bowl. Now, for those who don't know, Rafah is a city in southern Gaza with the only point of entry between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, called the Rafah crossing. A December 1st article from the Financial Times estimated that nearly 80%, I'm trying to find the bit where they say that, here it is, 80% of Gaza's population has been forcibly relocated to the southern portion of Gaza, near Rafah. Now, why are all those people there? Well, northern Gaza has been wiped off the map. A November 23rd AP article, nearly 3 months ago, by the way, quoted a political science professor from Al-Azhar University in Gaza City, who described the decimated northern area of Gaza as one big ghost town. There it is, right there. So, bombing such a city with a much higher density of civilians now would once again suggest that Israel ain't given two shits about civilians in their attacks on Gaza, which have been deemed to constitute a plausible genocide by the International Court of Justice. An article published by The Nation magazine on Monday adequately contextualizes the bombing of Rafah. Quote, "This year's Super Bowl was a weapon of mass distraction. If there's any justice, future generations will remember the game not for Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, or Taylor Swift, but for the U.S.-funded attacks on Palestinian civilians that occurred while so many Americans were glued to their TVs. During the game, watched by well over 100 million people in the United States, Israel launched a bombing raid of Rafah in the Gaza Strip, the most densely populated area on Earth. More than 1 million people had fled now leveled Gaza City to the refugee camps in Rafah and surrounding areas. Palestinians who have survived previous Israeli strikes are now staving off disease, destitution, and fear. They, along with people throughout the world, have been hoping for a negotiated ceasefire. The Israeli government and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fainted to take this idea seriously, but instead, as football players battled in Las Vegas, rained death from the skies. As of now, The Gaza Health Ministry estimates that Israel killed at least 67 Palestinians in the Super Bowl attacks. That doesn't account for the number injured or the attendant trauma. Ghada al-Kurd, who was sheltering in Rafah, told the New York Times, quote, "I swear to God, it was an indescribable night. The bombing was everywhere. We were convinced that the Israeli army was invading Rafah," unquote. The Israeli government is crowing a victory after freeing 2 hostages. And much of the U.S. media is following suit, relegating the deaths of Gaza civilians to a footnote, unquote. Now, obviously, it'll take more time for the full death toll to be calculated, but as of now, what can be deduced from this bombing is that Israel has once again shown any lack of restraint in bombing areas densely packed with civilians. And to add insult to injury, the Israeli Defense Force carried out this attack while everyone in the U.S., whose taxes fund their military, was distracted, watching the most popular TV event of the year. This is the government that Congress is ever so close to shipping an additional $14 billion. I don't think I've ever felt so much fucking disgust with Congress than this moment. Of course, the Young Democratic Socialist of America chapter at MTSU also shares this disgust, and we're taking whatever action we can to raise awareness about the issue. Recently, American Youth for Palestine and the Nashville chapter of the Party for Socialism and Liberation have started appearing at the Nashville City Council to make public comments calling for a ceasefire. Some folks from our YDSA chapter have decided to join them at these meetings, and we even had our very own co-chair, Dutch Dorman, make a comment at the January 23rd meeting. Now, he wasn't able to get onto the limited list of 10 spots for public comment at the February 6th meeting, but he did still attend with a few other members. Now, for those not in the know, I'm actually the social media operator for the YDSA chapter at MTSU. I did go to the January 23rd Nashville Metro Council meeting in support of that effort, but unfortunately I had to stay behind for the recent February 6th meeting because I had some other matters to take care of. But I do want to share one of the comments made.
Thank you. I'm here to voice my support for Resolution 235 in the honor of the life of King Hollins. A lifelong supporter of the oppressed in their struggles to achieve freedom, Mr. Hollins was a young man when he was jailed for taking a public stand against an overwhelming system of racial and economic exploitation and repression. He spoke of the need for people in struggle to evolve as the issues we struggle with also evolve. I would like to remind the Council that leaders in the struggle for Black liberation understood that all struggles for liberation are connected. Indeed, Fannie Lou Hamer correctly said that nobody's free until everybody's free. We have seen recently, here in this council, efforts to block the voice of the people from speaking on the current genocidal actions being taken against the people of Palestine and Gaza. I am reminded of Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, where, with laser focus, he destroys all the arguments of people who would paper over and disguise their own lack of courage with false appeals to proper procedure, waiting for the right time or letting the system take care of the issues. Similarly, we hear from the council that it doesn't speak on international issues. This is, of course, the same kind of obfuscation that seeks to hide the true motives of the council. We know this fetishization of procedure and precedent is a pretext meant to silence the people and to maintain the status quo and preserve massive imbalances of power. I ask you all to find the courage to recognize that all struggles for liberation are connected. There is a direct line from American segregation to Zionism and its attempts to erase Palestinians. Free Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Warner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warner, for sharing that. And I fully support what the YDSA is doing and what these other organizations are doing as well. Now, the next plans have not been officially announced by any of the organizations, but the next Metro Council meeting is going to be happening Tuesday, February 20th, so you can probably expect another action to take place then. And you'll be able to get updates on these actions in your Instagram feed. If you do want those kind of updates, you can follow at American Youths for Palestine. That's plural youths. So again, at American Youths for Palestine. And you can also follow at PSL Nashville. So again, that last one is PSL Nashville. If you follow one or both of those accounts, you will get updates on further actions that they'll be taking to in a very small way, take action against these absolute horrors that the Israeli government is committing and that our federal government is supporting. Alrighty, so next we're going to talk about Murfreesboro Mayor Shane McFarland and his whining on Twitter about the Murfreesboro City School District having to accept more immigrants into their schools. It's this is going to be a very long segment because I've got a lot to say on this. So Mayor Shane McFarland decided to post an interesting tweet, we'll say, it was about a week and a half ago. And he retweeted this video from Texas Governor Greg Abbott, which was a clip of his appearance on Fox News. Now, to understand McFarland's tweet, I need to contextualize what Greg Abbott is saying in this Fox News clip, because that'll kind of demonstrate just how much Mayor Shane McFarland lacks any kind of critical thinking skills. So I'm going to pull this clip up here. Alrighty, there we go.
Biden says he needs Congress to give him the power to do whatever he needs to do to secure the border. The fact is, as we all saw from what President Trump did, the President of the United States has the power. I must emphasize this. There is an obligation, there are laws in the United States that require the President to deny illegal entry of any illegal immigrant. And then if they do get into the United States, he has a legal obligation to detain those illegal immigrants. Joe Biden is failing at both of those duties. And that's exactly what gives Texas the authority to make sure that we can step up and secure our own border and protect our own state through self-defense.
So Greg Abbott is essentially claiming two things. One, Biden is not doing enough to enforce immigration laws at the border despite having the authority to do so. Two, because he's not properly enforcing immigration law, Texas must take matters into their own hands. Now, regarding this first point, the facts simply do not back that up whatsoever. According to a Washington Post article from December 29th, 2023, quote, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement deported more than 142,000 immigrants in fiscal year 2023, nearly double the number from the year before, as the Biden administration ramped up enforcement to stem illegal border crossings, according to the agency's annual report published Friday. Now, further, a May 17th, 2023 BBC article compares Biden's and Trump's actions on immigration. Quote, sending migrants back. What Trump did. In March 2020, at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Trump administration invoked Title 42, a controversial statute ostensibly meant as a public health measure. The policy allowed U.S. authorities to swiftly expel migrants, including asylum seekers, at the border. Nearly 400,000 people were detained and expelled between its implementation and January 2021, when Mr. Trump left the White House. Even at the height of the pandemic, Title 42 came under frequent criticism from those who argued the policy allowed the U.S. to expel asylum seekers without any legal process. Human Rights Watch, for example, said the policy was, quote, illegal and violates the human rights of those subjected to it, unquote. What Biden did. He defended keeping Title 42 in place, using the pandemic as justification. Over 2.28 million people were expelled using Title 42 authority between January 2021 and March 2023, the last month for which data is available. Now, I'd like to highlight, again, those numbers. Trump, 400,000 people detained and expelled. Biden, 2.28 million people expelled between January 2021 and March 2023. Now, you could make the argument that Title 42 was enacted for a shorter time under Trump's presidency compared to Biden's. For Biden's presidency, it was in place for 2 years, but even then, still, so it was in place for nearly a year. During Trump's presidency, and there were 400,000 people expelled. It was in place for 2 years under Biden's presidency. And in those 2 years, 2.28 million people were expelled. If we do the math here, so essentially what you would need to do to calculate this is multiply 400,000 by 2, because it was only in place for about a year under Trump's presidency. So that equates to about, assuming that Trump was still president for another year and Title 42 was in place, that would mean that ratio would only result in 800,000 people over 2 years, whereas Biden, much larger ratio, 2.28 million people. So Biden, even if you do the math to calculate the proper ratios, Biden still had a greater percentage of people expelled under the Title 42. Anyways, I say all that to make it very clear that Biden has actually done more deportation during his administration than Trump's. Now, that's the fact. Do I like that fact? No, absolutely not. I stand behind the principle that immigrants have built the strong foundations of this country and will continue to do that, and therefore there should be no fear-mongering about having an increase of immigrants. Now, there is another case to be made about how the war on drugs help maintains drug cartels' power in these different countries, and how not just decriminalizing but legalizing, taxing, and regulating all drugs might reduce that power. At the same time, based on limited reading that I've done on this issue, the actual effect that drug legalization would have on drug cartel power, it is questionable, as they've also diversified their enterprises by this point, meaning they've also done things like stealing oil and selling that. Trying to think of the other ones, and I can't think of the article that I read now. I believe it was from the Council on Foreign Policy, but I might be wrong on that. But nonetheless, I've seen some commentators say that, hey, just legalizing, taxing, and regulating all drugs is the way to really solve this problem at its core. But it's probably not the end-all be-all solution to the power that drug cartels maintain. Nonetheless, the excessive immigration deportation favored by the Biden administration over hiring of more immigration administrators kind of weakens Abbott's claim. Biden actually is enforcing immigration law, just not in a way that's as barbaric as Abbott wants to do it. Which leads me to rip apart Governor Abbott's second point, that that Texas has the authority to take matters into their own hands at the border. The Supreme Court just ruled that the federal government is the one who has the ultimate determination over how its border operates, not the state of Texas. Here's a January 22nd article from the Texas Tribune. Quote, "The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday ordered Texas to allow federal border agents access to the state's border with Mexico, where Texas officials have deployed miles of concertina wire." That's barbed wire. The order did not explain justices' decisions. For now, it effectively upholds long-standing court rulings that the Constitution gives the federal government sole responsibility for border security. In October of last year, Texas sued the federal government after Border Patrol agents cut some of the wire strung along the Rio Grande, arguing the Department of Homeland Security destroyed the state's property and interfered in Texas's border security efforts. The 5-4 order from the Supreme Court vacated a previous injunction from the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals that prevented Border Patrol agents from cutting the concertina wire. In recent weeks, Shelby Park in Eagle Pass has become the center of a standoff between Texas and the federal government over immigration enforcement. Most recently, Governor Greg Abbott has ramped up border enforcement around the 47-acre park by surrounding the perimeter by the razor wire and limiting access to the city park, unquote. So, Greg Abbott is essentially crying on Fox News about how he can't automatically assume the responsibilities of the federal government because he doesn't like the way they're enforcing border security. And our great mayor of Murfreesboro, Shane McFarland, accompanied Abbott in his wailing by retweeting this clip of his appearance on Fox News. Here is what he said in his retweet about a week and a half ago. Quote, "Folks, I don't care what political party you are a part of. It's undeniable the current border policy is a disaster. We just learned our school system in City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, has had a 20% increase in immigrant students since January of 2023. That's 160 students requiring additional ESL positions, English as second language positions, and support. If you don't think the taxpayer is bearing this burden, think again," unquote. So, quite literally, the mayor is just retweeting Greg Abbott's claim about Biden not doing anything at the border when Biden is literally deporting just as many, if not more, illegal immigrants than Trump. On top of that, McFarland doesn't acknowledge why Greg Abbott is making these claims. He either doesn't understand or refuses to acknowledge that Abbott simply doesn't like the fact that the Border Patrol, who has the constitutional authority to enforce the security of the border, is cutting down barbed wire at the southern border because it's getting in the way of letting them do their jobs. Further, McFarland says there's a 20% increase in immigrant students at Rutherford County, meaning additional English as second language positions will need to be created for an influx of 160 immigrant students. I love how he couches this as just a simple stating of the facts in the replies, and we'll get to that in a second, because it's not just a simple stating of the facts. It's racist, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, fear-mongering. Now, why would I constitute this tweet specifically? I'll touch on his clarifications in a second, but why would I constitute this tweet specifically as xenophobic fear-mongering? Well, 4 reasons. First, I'd like to note that he says all of this as if increased diversity in public schools is such a harmful thing. Personally, and I know I'm going out on a real fucking limb by saying this here, but I think increased diversity in public schools is a good thing. Oh my God, radical liberals celebrating diversity in public schools, celebrating an increase of diversity in public schools. Oh, yeah. Increased diversity in public schools is absolutely a good thing. Whatever the cost is, it's worth it. Whenever you have an increased diversity of students and you have like an increase of students coming from different nations of origin, that means you're going to have an increase of students coming into your school with different perspectives. And that's kind of what you want in a school, an increase of different perspectives. So people can, interact with them, question them, agree with them, disagree with them. That just makes for a better school environment. Second, he's complaining about having to welcome new students in general into the Murfreesboro school system. That's a good problem to have. That means people want to be in your district, whether or not they're immigrants. Yet Shane McFarland, our mayor, is openly whining about this on a public forum. People want to come to my school district. Why, God? Why? Yeah, great job at failing to make your town seem like an opening and welcoming environment, numbnuts. I'm sure every non-white person who sees that tweet is just going to say, fuck, I ain't going to that place. Third, complaining specifically about that increase being made up of immigrants without citing any other stats. Yeah, that heavily implies that he doesn't like the fact that it's the immigrant population, which is up by 20% in the Murfreesboro School District. Now, it'd be one thing if he was able to cite the specific number or percentage of new students coming into the school district, because he'd at least be able to provide better reasoning for his argument and demonstrate that, hey, like, out of all these new students, like a lot of these people are immigrant students. I probably still wouldn't agree with it, but at least he'd have better grounds to stand on with his argument, quote unquote here. Instead, this initial tweet, again, we'll address his clarifications in a second. In this initial tweet specifically, all he's doing is citing Greg Abbott's crying over illegal immigration as a reason to be concerned about an increase of immigrant students in his school district overall. Fourth, and finally, he is arbitrarily correlating perceived border policy issues with an increase in the Murfreesboro immigrant student demographic, citing no evidence to directly establish that illegal immigrants coming across the border are arriving here in Murfreesboro. So, I see this dumbass tweet as I'm walking out of class Tuesday, and it's blatant how mindless and how bigoted this tweet seems. I replied with a quick zinger, taking a cue from our co-chair of the YDSA, Dutch Dorman. He also replied with a similar remark as well. I said, quote, "Paying your salary with taxpayer dollars for your racist and anti-immigrant remarks is a much larger burden." Pretty base point, in my opinion. Pretty base tweet. Considering the guy blindly retweets a Fox News clip of Greg Abbott justifying subverting federal authority at the border, and considering the guy approved an ordinance to crack down on public drag performances in a college town with a notable LGBTQ plus community, which, by the way, just cost the city of Murfreesboro $500,000. Yeah, he's being paid way too fucking much. Like, y'all, I can't stress this enough. He retweeted a Fox News clip. This is the news organization that Shane McFarland still slurps up like a mindless little baby. Even if you're a conservative or if you're a fake nonpartisan stooge, like McFarland will imply here in a sec, there is no way for you to deny that Fox News is an unreliable, blatant propaganda network for conservative corporate interests. Don't believe me? Here's an April 18th, 2023 article from NPR. Quote, "Fox News and its parent company Fox Corp have struck a deal averting a trial in the blockbuster defamation suit filed by the election tech company Dominion Voting Systems over spurious claims of fraud in the 2020 presidential race. Judge Eric Davis of the Delaware Superior Court announced the settlement from the bench on Tuesday afternoon ahead of the trial's scheduled start. The parties settled for $787,500,000, about half of Dominion's original $1.6 billion ask. The amount, quote, represents vindication and accountability, said Dominion lawyer Justin Nelson. Quote, lies have consequences. Dominion CEO John Polis told reporters, quote, Fox has admitted to telling lies about Dominion that caused enormous damage to my company, our employees, and the customers that we serve. Nothing can ever make up for that. Throughout this process, we have sought accountability, he said. Quote, truthful reporting in the media is essential to our democracy, unquote. This is the, again, quote unquote, news outlet that our mayor still finds to be reputable, apparently, enough to retweet one of its clips and promote its unfounded implications. And I really want to harp on this next thing too, because I want to make it clear that I'm not just dunking on McFarland for his anti-immigrant and racist take here. The guy voted for
an ordinance
that attempted to ban even age-appropriate drag performances in public spaces. I covered this in October for like my first or second broadcast with WMTS. Here's what I said, and I'm going to be quoting directly from my notes for that broadcast. Quote, Ordinance 23-022 aimed to outlaw drag performances in public spaces, based on the false idea that drag performances are inherently sexual. However, its language goes much further than just trying to ban sexual content. The ordinance defines, quote, indecent materials or events, unquote, as, quote, printed materials, broadcast shows, parades, or other such displays that suggest, advertise, or display indecent behavior, or that is harmful to minors, unquote. That or does a lot of work here, allowing the definition to exclusively outlaw any materials or events that can be construed as harmful to minors. Here's a hypothetical. Back in my hometown of St. Louis, the Great Forest Park would host a Shakespeare production every summer. What if a public park here in Murfreesboro decides to host a production of Romeo and Juliet? Some triggered prune could construe the performance to be harmful to minors. It contains sexual references, violence, suicide. Can someone save the kids and outlaw Romeo and Juliet? And here's another one. What if a gun rights advocacy group decides to host a rally at a public park? According to a 2022 letter from the New England Journal of Medicine. Oh, and I just realized I forgot to display the ordinance there. I'll have a link to it in the podcast description if you want to read it for yourself. But again, according to a 2022 letter from the New England Journal of Medicine, gun violence was the leading cause of death among children in 2017. So I could use this ordinance to argue that the organizers of this rally are harming minors. Whether you want to host a pride festival, a rally for Second Amendment rights, or just perform a theater show, this ordinance threatens your right to free speech. That's what I said back in October. Now, there have been some updates on that. Thank God. They're good updates. I was commenting on this ordinance because the ACLU announced that a federal judge had forbidden the ordinance from being enforced during Borough Pride in late October. Yet, over the winter break on December 22nd, 2023, the Murfreesboro Holler they tweeted that, quote, "We're told Murfreesboro just quietly repealed their controversial decency ordinance, which was being used as cover for anti-LGBTQ plus censorship. There was no discussion, and it wasn't on the agenda, but hey, good news is good news."
Staff. Nope. We also have Ordinance 23048 repealing the Murfreesboro City Code, Chapter 21, Offenses and Miscellaneous Provisions, Article 1, Section 21 and 22.
So move.
Second. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any other business from staff?
Nope. Merry Christmas.
Further, the American Civil Liberties Union of Tennessee posted a press release about a week ago announcing that they settled a lawsuit with the City of Murfreesboro over this ordinance. Here is what they said. Quote, "American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU of Tennessee, Ballard Spar, and Burr and Foreman have settled a lawsuit filed against the City of Murfreesboro over its anti-LGBTQ plus ordinance and local policy denying all special event permit requests from the Tennessee Equality Project, TEP, founder and host of the annual Borough Pride Festival. As part of the settlement, the city has agreed to pay $500,000 to compensate for harm caused and reimburse attorneys' fees, repeal the anti-LGBTQ plus ordinance, and accept and process any future event permit applications from TEP. City Manager Craig Tyndall, who issued the ban on TEP permits last year, is prohibited under the terms from reviewing any future TEP permit requests. Now, the repeal the anti-LGBTQ plus ordinance bit is confusing because they say that as if they hadn't already done that. So I don't know if the city council had just decided to do that proactively in anticipation of losing this case, or if they just had a sudden change of heart. Considering the item wasn't on the agenda and it passed with no discussion, yeah, I imagine this was a Weasley proactive move to cover their asses in court. But in either case, it's not only good that the ordinance is dead for sure, but it's even better that the council has to shell out some cash for their reckless governance. Obviously, now, as a Murfreesboro resident, I don't like the fact that my tax dollars have to be spent on this, but justice had to be served when you crack down on First Amendment rights in such an authoritarian and hateful manner. I want to highlight another very important paragraph here. Quote, "The parties filed suit in federal court after Mr. Tyndall and Murfreesboro Mayor Shane McFarland engaged in a year-long concerted anti-LGBTQ+ campaign to chill TEP and Murfreesboro residents' protected speech and expression. The campaign culminated in the city establishing an official policy prohibiting the issuance of permits to TEP, discriminatorily and unconstitutionally denying TEP's request for a permit for 2023 Borough Pride, and implementing a sweeping and vague ordinance designed to censor any LGBTQ+ speech or conduct within the Murfreesboro community and from TEP. The ordinance was also cited as an attempt to justify banning multiple LGBTQ+ books from Murfreesboro public libraries." So, tying this back to my base reply I made to his mindless tweet, considering McFarland has demonstrated a clear lack of media literacy, promoting a literal propaganda network as news, considering that he's prone to publicly whining about increased diversity placing a burden on taxpayers without citing how much those financial costs actually amount to, and considering that he has no understanding of First Amendment rights, trying to pass a law that was not only transphobic in its intent, but actually went beyond those intents by allowing for any material or events that can be arbitrarily construed as harmful to minors, such as a production of Romeo and Juliet or a gun rights rally, and considering that lack of understanding free speech rights cost the taxpayer $500,000, yeah, this guy's salary is a much larger burden on taxpayers than immigrants ever will be. But I'm bearing the lead here, because your big dog's tweet was so provocative that Mayor McFarland saw that it was worth his attention. He replied in just about the dumbest manner that one could. Where are you at? Here it is. Quote, "You don't know me at all. It's not racist or anti-immigrant to say the disastrous border policy is putting a strain on our local system. That's just facts. Maybe put down your partisan blinders and realize local problems are created by inaction at the federal level. Fight the narrative, brother." Let's eviscerate this mindless reply sentence by sentence. Quote, "You don't know me at all," unquote. Never said I did. From what very little I know about you, I'd hate to know you anymore. From what little I do know about you, which extends to what I've already said about you in this segment, I can already tell that you ain't fit to be a fucking mayor. Quote, "It's not racist or anti-immigrant to say the disastrous border policy is putting a strain on our local system." No kidding, except that's not what you were saying. You were complaining about a perceived lack of security at the border and then incorrectly correlated that perception to a 20% increase of immigrant students in Murfreesboro schools, citing no further evidence to put that increase into perspective. Effectively, complaining about increased diversity in your schools and complaining about the fact that you had to just welcome more students. Boo-hoo-hoo. And furthermore, you kind of told us the real reason why you were making this false assertion in a later reply to another Twitter user. Twitter user Adam Bozeman says, "I need facts, not pearl clutching, Mayor. Are you saying 160 illegal immigrant students entered our schools or just 160 Hispanic Latino students and you don't know if they're illegal or not? And do all these immigrants not have jobs, buy things, and pay our local sales and wheel tax?" McFarland responds, "Great questions. The honest answer is we don't know, and neither does any other municipality. We get such vague guidance. We can't plan. We can't anticipate. We have no idea. My whole point is federal inaction causes major issues at the local level. Murfreesboro City Schools educates all, regardless of the answers to the questions you raised. But it is becoming a significant issue. And again, he throws out this line, those are all just facts. Facts. So McFarland admits that he, nor does any other municipality, know how many of these students are illegal immigrants yet. He's still claiming that for some reason, it's a major issue to have an increase of 160 immigrant students, to have more parents of different national origins to choose to send their kids to your school system. So the obvious conclusion, bumping into the microphone, the obvious conclusion is this. If your gut reaction is to panic about a 20% increase in immigrant students, an increase of students with a different national or ethnic background, yet you provide no other evidence to effectively demonstrate that it is a problem, and then also admit that you don't even know how many of these students are here illegally, then it's obvious that this is nothing but fear-mongering, inspired by internalized racist and anti-immigrant sentiment. So yes, McFarland, your tweet is racist. Your tweet is anti-immigrant. You provided no evidence to actually show that this is a massive burden for taxpayers to bear while inflaming fears about an increase of immigrant students in Murfreesboro schools. And you also whined about this increased burden on taxpayers after just before your support for a transphobic and authoritarian ordinance cost the taxpayer $500,000. Literally, if I'm not mistaken, this was on the same day that the ACLU made that announcement. Like, the irony is just unbelievable. But I'm still not done. I said I would eviscerate this tweet sentence by sentence. Quote, that's just facts. It's so funny. He drops this line in multiple tweets on this thread, and yet he's only cited one fact in this entire thread. And furthermore, he blatantly admits in the later reply that I just cited that he doesn't know any more facts to contextualize the only fact that he can provide. McFarland, I'd love to tell you this. Just because you assert something as a fact doesn't mean that it is automatically a fact. 99% of the bullshit you spew here is opinion based on one fact and one clip of a cable TV news segment from a conservative propaganda network. Quote, maybe put down your partisan blinders and realize local problems are created by inaction at the federal level. Unquote. That is real rich. This assertion that I have partisan blinders is coming from the dude who just retweeted a clip of one of the most hyper-partisan conservative propaganda news networks as a basis for your racist and anti-immigrant fear-mongering. Furthermore, you're implying that I base my political views on partisan affiliation alone. I don't do that. I base my political views on what is right, what is ethical, and what is just. Yes, that principle has led to my affiliation with the Young Democratic Socialist of America, MTSU, and yes, that makes this show a left-leaning political commentary show. But that doesn't mean I look at a political issue and determine my stance on it because that's what the radical lefties say is the correct position. I don't do that. Bumped into the mic again. It's quite condescending of you to automatically assume that's how I determine my political views. And furthermore, I'm at least honest about where my political leanings lay. You, on the other hand, you consistently champion conservative policies and yet pretend that magically, somehow, some way, you're just nonpartisan. I get you're in a nonpartisan office, but my God, dude, it would be real nice to see you knock off the whole centrist bullshit. You overwhelmingly support conservative ideas and policies, and you even endorsed Bill fucking Lee for governor, according to the Daily Journal News in 2018. See? Right there. Now, to be absolutely fair to McFarland, though, this is me taking this next phrase out of context in a desperate attempt to be kind to him. His assertion about federal inaction creating local problems is technically correct. That's why it's crucial for the federal government to enact a universal housing policy to humanely solve the homelessness epidemic that I've personally seen under the Broad and Main Street Bridge here in Murfreesboro. That's why it would be a good idea for the federal government to enact a Medicare for All plan, so we can actually guarantee universal health care to everyone without sending them into incredibly deep financial debt. And considering that Rutherford County suffered
298
non-fatal overdoses per 100,000 residents, where's Rutherford County on here? Here it is. Considering they suffered that many non-fatal overdoses per 100,000 residents, again,
298
per 100,000 residents, according to the Tennessee Department of Health's drug overdose dashboard. That's why it's necessary for the passage of a Medicare for All bill to coincide with the passage of a federal drug decriminalization policy, so that those people who are suffering from drug addiction can be guaranteed access to addiction treatment no matter their income, instead of being tossed away into a prison cell where they are unlikely to receive adequate treatment for their condition. According to, scrolling up here, this is according to a 2020 report from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. But again, I'm taking that part out of context to be overtly kind to McFarland. Really, the inaction he is talking about is only a perceived inaction on border security. And I say perceived because, as I cited with plenty of sources at the start of this long segment, the federal government is taking very strong action at the border. Now, finally, this last sentence from his incredibly mindless reply. The mayor wants me to, quote, fight the narrative, brother. First off, we are not brothers. You're my mayor, whom I have very little respect for. And I'm your citizen, who you've shown very little respect through your actions on policy matters and words on Twitter. I get that you're trying to use familial rhetoric to diffuse my accusations towards you, but I really don't like it when someone evokes that term as a cheap tactic to befriend me. I got one brother who was incredibly generous to get this mic as a surprise gift, Christmas gift a couple of years ago, by the way. He's my brother. You ain't my brother. I really don't like it when people get those relationships confused. Second, I think it's more important for you as the mayor of a decently sized and growing city to fight the narrative. It'd be nice if you fought Greg Abbott's narrative that the federal government is just letting illegal immigrants wander into the U.S. It'd be nice if you challenged the narratives that mainstream propaganda networks like Fox News churn out 24/7. It'd be nice if you challenged the transphobic narratives that drag queens are somehow harmful to children, instead of passing authoritarian ordinances that crack down on people's right to free speech and cost the taxpayer $500,000. It'd be nice if you challenged those narratives instead of condescendingly telling a random college kid to do what you have clearly refused to do for your entire tenure in office. Hey friend, that's all I've got for today, but thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of The Unnatural State of Affairs. The Unnatural State of Affairs broadcasts on WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee from 8 to 10 a.m. on Thursdays. The broadcasted version is censored, but I do also have a full DJ hour in the broadcasted version. I mostly play punk rock music and some rap music as well. And if you can't tune in at that time, though, you can also find the uncensored versions of all my talk show segments that day on my Substack, The Kennel, and you can also find audio-only versions on Spotify. If you liked what I had to say, hit that like button. If you have any thoughts that you want to share, hit me up in the comments section down below. And if you want to be notified of the next upload that I make, hit that subscribe button. You'll get an email in your inbox the next time I make an upload, and you'll also get a notification through the Substack app if you have that on your device. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good one.